Hey, how's it going? I hope September was really good for you. This month I read 9 books. I read a range of genres, and I want to jump right into it. So the first book is Private Arrangements by Sherry Thomas, and this is like a second chance romance. It's a historical romance. I read it on the strength of coming from number one in this trilogy, which is The Luckiest Lady in London. And that book was a five for me. The banter was there. Like, it was a man who was sprung, go, like 10 G's, and couldn't do anything about it. And I love that. So I was hoping for something similar, just in terms of not the same story obviously, but just in terms of the banter and the wit that was displayed in the stories between the characters. And so this did not compare. It was a 3 for me because it was a second chance romance. Nothing against that trope, but they spent most of their time apart. So how do they spend most of their time apart and being mad with each other and not having a conversation? So how do they then like have banter, you know what I mean? So for that reason it was a little bit disappointing for me. I am hopeful. Well, actually no, I don't think I'll read the next in the trailer in the series. Other things on the TBR, but yeah, that was number 1. The last one was better. So the second book that I read this month is Love Requires Chocolate by Dr. Ravynn Stringfield. So Ravynn she has a PhD. I follow her on Twitter, and I'm very fascinated by people who are able to be academics and also do things like write, especially fiction, especially romance, right? I think Ali Hazelwood is also one of those people, but there are many others. But anyways, this is a young adult book, a young adult romance. I will read them. They're not my favorite just because I feel like sometimes the reading young people like fall in love, it feels very cringe. It feels like I'm intruding, like I'm reading, like the feeling you feel when you're reading someone's diary, or someone's personal messages. It just feels a little bit weird to me. But this is the first young adult romance that I've read that I have not felt embarrassed by anything or cringe, and it still reads as young adult, like it didn't read as like trying to be young adult, just slapping young adult on it, but it's actually young adult. And it was really, I've never watched Emily in Paris, so this is basically a girl who goes on like an exchange program to Paris. She's writing a screenplay and she's acting and dancing and singing in it, and along the way she goes to all these monuments in Paris that are related to, or that had that were built for or in honor of what's her name, Josephine Baker, right? And so I don't know much about Josephine Baker, so for me this had a little bit of history and it's a little bit of education. Love when I can learn something. And also one of the things I really liked about this book was she, by going to all these places, the popular places, the Louvre, the Seine, all these landmarks and historical, cultural places that people around the world go to visit every day, and seeing that we just came out of the Olympics this summer that was in Paris, those things were also on display if you watch that opening ceremony, some of those things. And so what I liked about it was fiction, but it had these real life monuments in there that one could go and visit. And I think this is one of those books I like when, like, I always think about ideas for content, right? And if somebody does this, I don't mind, go ahead, take it. So this is a case where it's a book that I feel like you could use as a guide, like, an itinerary. You could make an itinerary around the items in this book, or the activities done. And so anyways, back to the actual plot of the book. So she's American. She's from the DC area, which is where the author is also from, and the main character goes there for this exchange program, and she's going to learn to improve her French and to study to write her screenplay and perform it, right, for credit, right? And so she meets this boy who becomes her French tutor, and they're, you know, practicing her French over time. And she has roommates who don't take to her at first, and then we'll find out why that is. And you know, there's a little bit of drama, but it's not too much, it's not unreal, it's not just unnecessary. And of course it moves the plot along without you feeling like you want to slap one of the characters. And I don't know, I just think it was really tasteful. I think it was fantastical in the way that it's, you know, a 17-year-old who's on her own in a major city for the first time, with some context, but having not been there before. Her French isn't that great. She loves chocolate, and she has the opportunity to, you know, go work in a chocolate place for a little bit with her tutor. And you know, there's a little bit about friendship there and support. Her family, you know, friends from home, new friends. And I just think it was really nicely done. I think it showed some character development, and they had a resolution that, even though it was basically would end up with being like a distance relationship, that there's a resolution that could actually work. And I really like this book. I think for what it is, for young adults, it's the kind of book I'd actually keep a copy of, like get a physical copy of, so you could, like I said, use as a guide, you know, plan an itinerary about it. I think it would make like a really fun TikTok, for example, like you read the scene and then you go do the thing, you know what I mean? And then also it was romance. You know, I think sometimes the young adults gets caught up too much in the teen drama and not so much in the actual romance, which is why I read romance. And so I think it did it justice. I think it did the genre of romance justice, as well as young adult, you know. So yeah, that's all I will say on Love Requires Chocolate. So book number 3 from this month is a novel love story by Ashley Poston, and I gave it 5. Let me tell you why I gave this 5. When I was reading this book, I was in the book with them, and it was a story within a story. So this is one of those books that I keep different tags on Goodreads, right? Or The Storygraph. Those are books, if you don't use those are sites that allow you to manage what books you've read, books you're currently reading. It allows you to write notes on them and reviews, and but they're specifically geared towards people who, I guess, read a lot, and also publishers use them to identify how well a book is doing, if people like it, stuff like that. Anyhow, this book, basically a girl, and okay, that's one of the things I like about this book, is it wasn't just the romance between the main characters, but it had strong themes of friendship and of commitment in friendship. The book started that way. So there are these 2 best friends, and one of them is getting, you know, is basically knows she's going on vacation to get engaged, and the best friend that stays behind, who is really her story, they go on this, she continues on the trip that her best friend and some other friends in this book club would go on every year. It's like a reading retreat. Also, I really want to do that, at least once in my life, multiple times. Just, you know, go with a friend or 2 and just talk about books and enjoy books. You know, so like a book vacation. But anyways, so this her friend's gone to get engaged, and she's sad because she sees how her long-term relationship didn't work out, and her friend basically is moving on, and you know, they always thought they'd do all these things together. And so she's a little bit sad, but she persists. She gets in her car, she drives towards this place that they always stay at for this, you know, book retreat, and she ends up in a town that's actually the town that's the basis of her favorite series of books, and all the characters are there. So she's like in the book land place, and it's so fascinating because I think the author did a good job of writing a story within us, writing a main story in a fictional land. So there's kind of like a fantastical element to it, but they're real people, they're real lives. The love interest for a long time. We don't know if he's really of this world or if he's like the real world or if he's based in the books. And the author spends the main character spends a lot of time trying to figure out his deal as she's falling in love with him. And it's also, she deals with the fact that is anybody calling her. Like when she's there, she doesn't have any cell service because it's not really a real place. And she thinks maybe people care about her, but she kind of thinks maybe not. Everybody's got their own thing going on, because she was the only one who ended up going on this reading retreat anyway. You know how as adults everybody's busy and you have routines, and then after a while they just fall apart because everybody's plans are different. Like that's really real. And I don't know, I feel like this book was very good at talking about real life things that happen while also defending people's like changes in life, and also one of the things I also really liked was the author wrote about how the author who wrote the books in the book wrote romance, and that the male character read romance, and that is not something to be ashamed of, because a lot of us, it might be romance novels for some, you feel kind of cute about saying or like genuinely enjoying that genre because it feels like it's not real or whatever it is, or people don't have expectations, like that's not how the real world works or whatever it is, or something else that sparks joy for you, and maybe it seems really childish to someone else. Like you like Legos, you come home every day and you're 35 and you just build Legos. Like you buy a new set every week and you just build it for the week, and when you're done you donate it or you keep it or whatever, like there's nothing wrong with finding joy in simple things. And I think this was like an ode to that. It was also an ode to like authorship and the work and the heart that goes into it, and the fact that sometimes authors die or sometimes authors don't write anymore, but there's this body of work or these bodies of work that remain of them for people who fell in love with their work. Sometimes you have never meet your heroes, they say, and it talks about how people can never meet your heroes, they say, and it talks about how you might meet someone who's done something, a body of work or something, and how that experience might go for you. And it spoke to the thanklessness sometimes of authorship. And I was also in this book club recently, and the author has written 2 books so far, and she, like, we're in the book club and the person was like, when is the next book coming? And the host of the book club was also like, listen, do you recognize the amount, first of all, this book was like this thick, do you recognize the amount of work and research that went into this book right here? And now you're asking her, when is the next one coming? Like, give her a break, like let her breathe. And even if the next one was in the works, with the amount of research she does for her books, like it would take a while, and so in that sense, as the consumer, it's very for the author, it can be thankless, because we're just like, yeah, I want more, and it's like that with people who make content too, but you don't really think about, sometimes the consumer doesn't really think about, or the audience, about what it takes to really create something like this, and how much of yourself you pour into it. And so yeah, I've said a lot, but I think that was a 5-star read for me. And the side characters I thought would be really distracting, because there were quite a few, right? In the book there's a whole book land with all the characters of this series, and they're all there, and because they're not the main characters, sometimes it could feel like, oh, they're there but they're annoying because you can't keep track of everything. But it wasn't that bad. So that's not a drawback. I'm just saying it could have gone that way. But yeah, that is something that I thought about at some point. Like, is this negative or is it working? Book number 4 is the Rom-Commers by Katherine Center. I gave this 4. Now, this for me, I also tagged with story within a story, because some of them my tags are literal and some of them are a little more figurative, or close enough. So in this case, it's about screenwriters. So those are people who write plays or books, usually sorry, not books, or movies. And so these people write movies, and there's this girl, like, she studied the art of the rom-com, okay? And there's an author who he writes more action type stuff, but she loves his work regardless of the fact that her thing is rom-coms. She loves his work. And so one of her friends who's in the industry passes along this screenplay to her that this guy has written, and it's rubbish. Like, it is not good at all. Anybody could see from what they described that it is not good, even though he's done amazing work. It's not good. And we come to find out later on that basically, as many creatives do, they either burn out or they can't have writer's block, whatever it is. And if they're even able to produce a body of work, it's not at the standard that we expect it to be based on the precedents they've set with other work. So anyways, her friend says, hey, there's this job for you to help him. It's basically to go ghostwrite, which means that you work on it but you don't necessarily get credited, right? You get paid for it. You might get paid really well for not being credited on it, but that work that you put in, nobody will know it's you. You say that to the grave, okay? So her friend tells her, hey, this could be a job for you, and she's got personal stuff going on. She can't just up and leave. She's a caretaker for her dad and her younger sister. She's basically sacrificed so her younger sister can go to college and be free of being caretaker. And so in the end, they make these arrangements, and she goes out to California. She leaves where she's from and goes to the total opposite side of the country to work for this guy. And what does the guy do? He says, who is this person, this no-name person? I do not want to work with anybody. I don't need anybody to help me write. And basically she's like, okay, nobody doesn't want me here, I'm leaving. So in the end, because the friend lied, the friend told her she had a job already, and she did not. And even as I'm telling you all of these things, there is still more to read in the book. What I thought this author did really well was write about writing. So this is the second book this month, I'd say, that talks about writing. And yes, it's fictional, right? The feelings behind it, and how personal some people feel about putting together a book, how some people feel about making sharing that process with someone, how some people what are the reasons for which people chase their dreams or don't chase their dreams, personal reasons, valid reasons, invalid reasons. Other things I think this author did well was talk about sometimes grief. I don't know if lately in the last few months, whenever grief comes up, and mind you, no one really close to me has died, but maybe it's because I've learned from the Storygraph that I read a lot of emotional books. I read light-hearted and emotional, and I read medium-paced books, apparently, based on the Storygraph. So if you want to kind of read a profile of yourself and recommendations based on books you've read and enjoyed a lot, I think that the Storygraph is really good at doing that. And it doesn't mean that you're in a box, right? It shows you the spread of different types of books you read, but it will also give you a one sentence of the top 3 to 4 characteristics of books that you read. And I thought that was really interesting. So anyways, so this, they fall in love. He also doesn't believe in love. He's one of those guys, rom-coms that's not real life, whatever. He wants the action, he wants the this, the that. And she I don't know, it was just done really well. And even as when you hear that, he doesn't believe in it, and he's gonna fall hard. The unfolding of that is what makes it interesting, and this author did that so well. How do you he's resistant to the idea, and even some of the things she wrote cliche things that are happening. I'll give you one example. She wrote a case where they were in the kitchen trying to evade someone who was coming into the home, and I won't say if it's in a good way or a bad way, read the book, but they fell on top of each other, and these things happen, right? It's in the rom-com. You watch the show and they have these awkward moments where they're like trying to hide and shuffling around, and they might fall, and he, throughout the book, when these things happen, he's denouncing that these things are romantic. He's denouncing that these things actually happen, and when it happens to him, he's just like, oh, okay, I get it now, like I get it, you know. And I just thought the humor, like, it was a rom-com, it was so good. And why did I not give this 5? I don't remember. I think I didn't give this 5 because even though it was a written, so I think it had to do with the oh, I know what it was. She was a little too forgiving. She was too forgiving. He said some mean stuff to her multiple times through the book. He called her nobody, like literally said, like, who is she? Like, she got this prestigious fellowship and she didn't take it. He threw away your dreams, and like, he was just mean. And she was just like coming back, and I'm like, excuse me, no. And it's not my life, I wouldn't wait, but because I feel that particular way, I rate books based on how I feel about the book, not just about the writing purely, or about, you know, whatever. No, I rate it about how the characters behave, how I feel about it at the end, everything all together. And I know at the end of a 5-star how I'm supposed to feel, and I did not feel that way. I had reservations about that at the end, so that's why I got a 4. Anyways, I'm done talking about that book. The book number 5 is The Lotus Palace by Jeannie Lynn, and this is number 1 in the Peking Lee series. I think that's how you say it, or I might be saying that wrong. So it's Chinese historical fiction, and it takes place in this, like, you know, like how you have the red light district in the Netherlands, which is known for being like a center for nighttime entertainment and prostitutes and stuff like that. Well, this was like in one of those historical times when in China, where they had these regions, or a particular region as like a pleasure area or something like that. And so they had different houses with like courtesans, which are more skilled. They're not just like straight up prostitutes, they're more skilled. And yes, you can pay to have sex with them, but they're not just, okay, you know, like, what's up, and you pay the money and then you cut, like, you leave. No, it's like entertainment with it. So they what's the word, they entertained, right? They did the tea pouring, and they had poetry and recitals, and they'd have like gatherings, almost like salons, like the French salon, with sharing of ideas. And then also, if you had enough money, you could pay for the pleasure of intimate time with the people. Anyways, so this is like a series. This is the first in the series, and it's about like this girl who's like a servant to one of the courtesans, and a guy who is like a scholar in the area. So they have these exams, and they take these exams to become like government officials and politicians and stuff like that. And so the guy doesn't actually want the courtesans, he wants one of the servants of the courtesans. And this servant is basically like inextricably linked with one of the courtesans, and we later learn their relationship and stuff like that. But essentially, she's also, the courtesans they're bought when they're young, so they're basically the madams of the house, or the owners of the brothels own them, and they can work for a long time and potentially pay it off, but usually their purchase price is so high that they're indentured for life. And the same for the servants, so they're basically in this job forever. So the only pleasures they get out of it are like gifts from the men and stuff like that, right? They dress really nicely, they look really nice, but they're essentially slaves in the houses that they work for. So, and the entertainment. So anyways, the story was basically about this guy. He's a scholar, but he's also, we find out, he's a little bit more than that. Like, he's got specific jobs, kind of like a spy, but he plays the fool, so people think he's kind of dumb and just spends money at will, and you know, that kind of thing. But we find out that he's actually there for a purpose. And so there's a murder, and there's intrigue, and there's a mystery, and you know, they're basically working together to uncover the whole thing and how it affects them together. And they're from different stations. He's from a really I don't want to say, yeah, he's from a powerful family, and they expect a certain station of him. He's from the type of family that he would have been betrothed to someone from he was young, or from they were young. And so this lady's a servant in a brothel. Like, how, you know, like, how would that work? And so part of it is like seeing how it works out, them uncovering this mystery. And so the mysteries follow. This is like a mystery type series of historical Chinese fiction. And I thought the mystery surprisingly is what keeps me engaged and gave me the 4. The romance was okay. I thought what was interesting about the romance was we find out previously was sold into like to be a straight up prostitute, not even a courtesan. So the less pretty ones, their families were poor, and this was from the time in the culture where girl children weren't valued. And so she was sold off, and so she had experiences when she was a little bit younger than when this guy met her of being that. And so she had to overcome that psychologically, that he's not just another like John, and I thought that was written really delicately, like the way, in a realistic way, and the way it was expressed. Mind you, that's not my personal experience, right? But when I say like realistically, it felt like that's what it could be. It didn't feel like a story time version of that, So I don't know, I think the feel as well, this author did a good job of giving the feel of the intrigue, of the of the furtiveness of the stolen moment. I think that was what I enjoyed. It was like a romance that was hard earned for both of them, and that was nice to read for me. So that's why this was for me. Yeah. All right, so book number 6, The Lost Love Songs of Boysie Singh by Ingrid Persaud. This is the best book I read this month, and this is one of the best books I've read this year. And this is only the second book I'd say that I so completely, like at the end of it, like I wanted to tell everybody about it. The first one was How to Say Babylon by Safia Sinclair, which I read in January, and that's also a Caribbean read, coincidentally. That's of a Jamaican author. This one is from a Trinidadian author. She lives in the UK now. So this book is based on somebody who existed in real life. His name was Boysie Singh. He was a menace to society in the country Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in the 40s and 50s, and he was an Indian man who seems to have had a rough childhood. We get a little bit of the history of it, so it's a mix of the things they know about him. The author did a lot of research, talking to family members, talking to people in the communities. It was such a widespread, like he was tried publicly, he was eventually hanged for his crime. So Trinidad is an island to the east of the Caribbean, and sort of along those string of islands, then there's the Caribbean seas in there, and then the next nearest down is like Guyana and Venezuela and so on. And so he used to run a lot of gambling. He used to run prostitution. So he had gambling houses, prostitution. So he kind of was a pimp, and he also would be a fisherman. That was supposed to be the legitimate business, but he would also have people pay him to take them to the mainland, to like Venezuela, and dump them in the ocean. Just rob them, dump them in the ocean, and then come back and do the same thing to other people. So he'd have people pay for passage to the mainland for whatever reason they were going there, and they would never make it, and they'd never come back. And so he was awful. People were terrified of him. He was the kind of person that people would that the parents would say to their kids, behave, or Boysie Singh gonna come for you. It was that kind of person, right? Like they used to terrify their kids and get them in line. And so I didn't know that going into this, but knowing that this is from a real story where people to this day, there are like our grandparents' generation in that country, some of them were on the jewelry for it. It was everywhere in the news. It was one of those. He was tried like 3 times because he did things and he got off twice, and then the 3rd time he didn't get off. And the thing he didn't get off on, this is, mind you, like if you go to his Wikipedia page, you'll find it. The 3rd thing, they weren't even sure that he did it, but they finally got it. They couldn't get it away. Those times where people are so bad and they get away on technical things, or legally they can't hold them, but the next time they catch them, they just make an example of them. Yeah, it was like that. So he went, the son. Yeah, it was like that. So he had a lot of he did a lot of things, and so the story is about him, but it's also told from the perspective of four women whose lives are intertwined with his over his time, over his lifeline, and so each perspective was different. Everybody's story was different. Some of them died, some of them lived, and as you're reading, you're waiting to see who actually survives him, and it's the kind of story that gives you death announcements, and it's the kind of story that gives you it's an it gives you insight into Trinidadian culture, but it's not meant to be a commentary on that. You have books that they're written, and one of the author's goals is to teach you about that culture if you're not from there, right? This wasn't her goal, but you get it along the way. So the words they use, and I think this is one of those books, if you're not from there, I'm not from Trinidad, I'm from the Caribbean, I'm not from Trinidad, I would still listen to the audiobook, because the words are going to trip me up, and even if you sound it out, like you can read what's on the page, the feeling behind it, the context, right, even if you don't understand it, when you hear it, it's incredible. But reading it is just as impactful, because what this author did is she didn't write the Creole that they use in Trinidad in quotes. That happens a lot, right? So you give the official language, no quotes, and then when you're writing a Creole, you give it quotes. But what she says is, we don't talk like that. We just, or if our English is broken, we just speak. And so that's what she writes. And I think those are choices. Sorry, I'm going kind of to the side. But from a linguistic perspective, on that's how you get to standardize. There's a lot of discussion now about standardizing some of our Creoles, and that is how you get to standardize a language, because it has to be written, it has to have there has to be a concerted effort to document and to, right, we have grammatical rules, which is why we can call some of these things a language, right, even though it's not officially used for business, for example. But we know there are rules when you how you pluralize things, how you refer to groups of things, collections of things. And so writing it, right, and sort of accepting how it's written is one of the ways we start to standardize these things. And I thought that was really important, and we don't, right. So these four women are intertwined in his life, and you find out who survived him. There's interesting things like obituaries and news items, because it was like a hot topic back when he was alive. And it's really fascinating how the author wrote, the use of the language. And I think it's the kind of book that if you're not from there, it might be worth listening to the audiobook if it's possible, or borrowing it, but yeah, this was so good, done so well. And I'm actually from this gonna go back and read her first book, which is Love After Love. I'm gonna go listen to that or read it. Probably listen, because I really like the accents. I like listening to books that aren't, if it's not British or American, that I'm familiar with how that sounds. I like listening to it. So African books, Caribbean books, I like listening to audiobooks. Yeah, so, or other dialects. This was a really good book. It was the kind of book that I know is gonna be in my top 5 for the year. I definitely know what my top 3 is. I'm gonna do a roundup at the end of the year. I know what my top 3 is so far based on books I remember how I felt reading them, and I wanted to tell everybody about it at the end of it. So yeah. Also, what tree is this? What kind of tree is this? Let's see who is watching. If you could tell me what kind of tree this is. 7 out of 9 is Devil's Desire by Laurie McBain. Now this book, honestly, looking back, I'm wondering if I should have given it a 2-star. I stand by the 3. I think it was okay for 3. I don't think it was 2. 2 is like barely a book to me. Like, it was so off-putting, or it just was barely. Now barely a book would probably be 1, meaning like how are these sentences even in sequence? Like, are they even in a sequence? And honestly, if it's that bad, I probably just would DNF. But anyways, so this book is it's a historical romance apparently from the 70s, and I think it was okay, but I cannot remember anything about this book. There are some books in this life you will read, you can't remember anything about it. I had to go back to Goodreads to look at the blurb for the book, and the blurb for the book doesn't tell you what it's about either. It's just swearing that it's an epic saga and da da da. And when I looked at what I wrote, I said it's unnecessarily dramatic. And I couldn't, because the book doesn't even tell you the names of the main characters to like jog your memory, and I don't see. So I think it's about a girl who ran away from her betrothed and got married to this guy. He was in the aristocracy, and then they went to his country estate, and there's some intrigue around it with French spies and whatever, and she's yet in the midst of it, and she gets kidnapped, and he comes and gets her, and it's just dramatic. It's unnecessarily dramatic. It's like it packed all the drama into one book, and it just wasn't necessary, like, for all the side quests and whatever. And so for that reason, I don't know, I think the romance, I read romance for romance, okay, the romance I think was okay, which is why I gave it a pass and gave it a 3. But no, this is not, no. But apparently this is like one of the grandmothers, oh, the patriarchy, why do we just default and say grandfathers? This is one of the grandmothers of historical romance apparently, like one of the very early ones that made it a thing, you know, like the Bodice Ripper they call it, like one of the first that got published and got wide acclaim and whatever. So but yeah, this was not my favorite. It wasn't bad. When I was reading it, I didn't come away feeling like, oh, what is this? But as I'm going, like, it's bad. I finished this on September 25. That was like last week. I should not have forgotten the details, and my review and the blurb are not helpful. So yeah. Alright, book number 8 is The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. Alright, I give this 4. This book was a good book, but I think some of the tropes, the way it started, it was a little questionable, and that's why it's a 4 for me, because I think it's a tool that some authors use. Like when you're writing romance, right, there's a trope, there is a basis that it is, if it's friends to lovers, if it's enemies to lovers, if it's whatever it is, right? This book, it was friends, like friend zones, like so I guess friends to lovers, if you will. But basically this girl is like in a relationship, and the guy is in the military, and he's away, and he's coming back soon, but she meets this guy who she pretty much falls in love with. Now, if that's gonna be problematic for you, you might not like this, but that happens super early in the book. So if that's only happened within the first 20% of the book, then you know there's more to come, and you have to figure out how it goes, right? So when I say it's a tool, I mean that when you establish a trope early, you can play with it, right? It's not like you're writing to uncover what the scenario is. When you kind of upfront, it's like, okay, they like each other, they really shouldn't, they can't mess around because she's in a relationship. then where do you go from there, you know? And it's the unfolding of that. So I think good things about this one was the way they showed friendship. I think the other reason I gave this a 4 was it felt like pandering. There's some books that, so, okay, let me say it this way. It read like a pick-me. A pick-me is when they say, like, you know, women are trying to show to men that they're writing for the male gaze, they're performing for the male gaze, and it felt like that sometimes. And I know that's not the case, right? The average man is not going to go pick up this book in a bookstore, but it read like I'm so cool. I'm the kind of girl who I can watch. We talk about, you know, the movies, and my dog's name is Stuntman Mike, and because that's a movie reference, and we watch you know, we eat burgers together, and I'm really blunt, and I have all these characteristics that men would really dig, and the guy in the book is saying that, you know, like, she's so cool and she's so straightforward and whatever, she's not super prissy or whatever. And it felt like that too much for me. That gave me a little bit of the ache. Nothing wrong with it, it's a perspective, right? But it literally felt like when a girl is like trying to be like impressive to a guy, you know, like, hey, I'm not super high maintenance, I can roll, I can chill, you know. So that was one of the things I was like, oh, okay. And then but I think what the book did well, again, with grief, like, there was, you didn't see it coming, you kind of did, because you were like, how are they gonna make this? You know, there's always a conflict. For some people, they call it a third act breakup. There wasn't a third act breakup per se. Well, maybe there was, but it depends on how you look at it. But there's always something that happens, you know, in like the last third of the book, that, you know, some major hill to climb or something before the final resolution. And I think that was a little bit unexpected, not fully, but it was a little bit unexpected. And so there was enough in this book to keep you engaged throughout. And apparently this is the first in the series, so one of the other characters in the book is getting a book, and I'm curious. I would read it. This book didn't turn me off of that, but I don't know if I'm that curious. This was also another book that showed, you know, really good friendship, love, and yeah, I don't know, I'm just thinking about what I said, you know, about like my criticisms of the book. I stand by it. I just think it's really interesting. I wonder if someone else would have that perspective. If you read this book, let me come back and let me know if you think it's like pandering. But yeah. Alright, so my final book this month is Butterfly Swords by Jeannie. So this is my second Jeannie this book. Having read the first one, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. Let me see what audiobooks are available under this author from my library. And I came across this one. I was like, okay, it's kind of like a bodyguard type romance. And I said, okay, fine. So it's a girl who's the daughter of an emperor. She gets promised to somebody for a political affiliation. You know how it is, they marry the daughters to strengthen bonds, political bonds and stuff like that, or for power. And she decides to run away, and as she runs away, she finds out some people like double crossed her, and then she meets this guy on the way, and he is a foreigner. He's a white man basically. She's Chinese. And you know, he says he'll help her get to where she's trying to go, and they fall in love along the way, First of all, this book didn't need to be this long. It was an okay romance. I think it wasn't that good for it to be this long. It was approaching 11 hours, I think. What do I want to say? Girl runs away from home, guy protects her, they fall in love, the family's disappointed, they have to resolve that. I won't say how they resolve that, but they have to resolve it, and all of these things. And I enjoyed the other Jeannie Lynn I read more. I enjoyed the Peking Lee, number one more. I stand by 3 stars. I don't think it was a bad story. It was just okay, and it was so long. It didn't need to be that long. Oh my goodness. But let me fix my face. It was fine. I enjoyed. I think these are my first, outside of She Who Became the Sun, these are my first, like, that wasn't really a romance. These are my first historical Chinese romances, and they were good. I like them. I don't know, I think I'm attracted to culture. I think I realized I'm attracted to books that have culture, like multicultural books. So yeah. Anyways, coming up, I am reading a few things. I'm reading Open Water. I'm reading let's see what else I have. The Friend Zone Experiments. That was an advanced reader. It's published now, but it was an advanced reader for me. And there are a few others. I'll be reading the rule book. So those are things to look forward to in October. Yeah, I hope things are going well. It's coming up to Christmas time, if you celebrate, or just holidays in general, that time of year when everything slows down. I've been marveling at, you know, the corporate effect, not the corporate effect, the September, there's a term for it, September surge that happened this month. Like from the end of August, I noticed like all those emails, people looking for job, people looking to hire people, because they see the end of the year. We're in Q4, we're coming to the end of the year, and you know, all the positions they want to fill, or all the people they let go, and they like, we need to get this done because we don't want to do it in the new year. My mom also says sometimes when they don't want to pay bonuses out, they get rid of people and then hire new people at that time. I think that's insane, but she would know. She was from that area for a while, from corporate, like accounting and stuff. So yeah, it's been an anxious month for me, but we're doing what we got to do, you know. And for all the people who had birthdays, happy belated birthday. There are lots of people born in September, so happy belated birthday. And yeah, I hope October is really kind to you. See you next month.